treated rather as a folktale cycle than a single fixed story. The Corpse Bride that many of us know and love, thanks to Tim Burton, is actually based on some truly disturbing and horrifying ideas. Welcome to Check That Book, a special place on the internet where you and I get acquainted with arguably the most disturbing stories ever written and movies ever made. But again, this is weird because movies are also stories, just in a cinematographic format. So I'll keep saying stories ever told. How about that? I need a new intro. This channel has become something else, not just primarily about books like it used to be in the very beginning. This time we have some Eastern European Jewish folklore origins, specifically from communities in Poland, Lithuania and Russia between the 18th and 19th centuries. Yes, that is the era and the place where the story of the Corpse Bride comes from. But let's begin with a short summary first, for all of you who are not familiar with the story for some reason. A young man, often a groom on his way to be married, absent-mindedly places a ring on what he believes is a tree branch, a fence post, or some kind of bone protruding from the ground. The object is actually the finger of a dead woman. By placing the ring, he unknowingly completes a marriage vow. That night, the Corpse Bride appears and claims him as her lawful husband. Now, depending on the version, she either tries to drag him to the grave, following him and relentlessly just haunting him, sort of, and released only when the rabbi or some wise figure dissolves this accidental marriage. The living bride survives, because there was a living bride too, but the boundary between life and death has been dangerously crossed. Those sorts of things. I mean, it's, again, to a level, a cautionary tale. Just be fucking careful what you do. I mean, especially if you're practicing practicing the vows. I mean, it's some serious shit. You don't want to be saying things that go into the void. You know what I mean? You just if you practice safely. That sounds very odd, but here we are. This is the story. This is what happened. Not in real life. I mean, this is not based on some particular true life case. However, you see, the Jewish law places enormous weight on spoken vows and ritual acts, especially marriage contracts. And to be fair, not just the Jewish law. It is pretty much present in every culture in the world. The horror of the tale lies not in malice, but in legal and spiritual inevitability. A vow, once made, has consequences, even beyond death. Related folklore appears in some German and Baltic revenant tales, Slavic ghost bride stories and legends, and later adaptations in European Catholic literature. Those are quite interesting to look up and perhaps deserve a much longer video, just for the sake of exploration of this subject matter. I do believe it is an interesting look at some religiously spiced stories that might or might not be true. The story of the Corpse Bride itself reflects the deep anxieties about improper burial and the disrespect for the dead, as well as the binding powers of words and rituals. But most importantly, and I believe I agree with this one as well, it is the fear of the dead returning with legitimate claims on the living, into the world of the living, and that is truly frightening. You know, all those ghost stories about dead relatives, or not relatives, no, sometimes relatives, but more often than that, dead enemies returning from the grave just to get ya. You know, all of those tales. They're creepy and spooky as heck, and Corpse Bride is one of those. It is disturbing if you look at it from this angle. This is a folk tale with no single author, for that matter. It is passed down orally. However, it's entered a literary tradition through some, again, Jewish oral storytellers and 19th century folklorists who recorded Yiddish and Hebrew tales. Howard Schwartz wrote Lilith's Cave, one of the modern retellings of it. Interesting. Also Isaac Singer, thematically similar, and Revenant stories, as well as Ansky's The Dybbuk, 1914. While not the same story, it draws on the same belief system, a dead woman's unresolved claim binding the living through law and ritual. In 2005, famously, we have Tim Burton's version of the story, and the most known one. It is loosely inspired, of course, by all of these folk tales and mentions that I've just spoken about, and it, of course, significantly softens the horror and removes this legal religious terror at the core of the original. So what I mean is, if you've watched Tim Burton's Corpse Bride, well, first of all, one can argue this is not a film for children, albeit the animation and style kind of advocate for it, but I mean, depends, yeah. I mean, if you're in your teens, it's a cool little film, a weird and a spooky little one. I love Tim Burton's style, by the way, so no claims here. I have no beef with Tim Burton's movies. Now, in a pre-modern Jewish law, marriage could technically occur through a ring and a spoken formula, even unintentionally. Rabbinical courts historically ruled on bizarre edge cases, including mistaken vows. Of course, it does not necessarily mean that a guy went into the woods practicing his marriage vows, etc., and accidentally, you know, placed a ring on a branch and it turned out to be a corpse. I mean, that's bullshit. I mean, most likely this didn't happen. But if you think about it, some rituals can be performed by accident. Again, either through practice, when you don't know what you're doing exactly because it's just practice, you're not prepared for it, you might say something wrong. Or, on the other hand, when you don't know the circumstances, you don't pay attention, much like Victor in this wee movie, The Corpse Bride. So accidents happen, and when they do, sometimes the consequences are horrible, and this is what The Corpse Bride is trying to tell us. I mentioned fear of improper burial. Now, graves disturbed by animals or erosion or poverty were common. What I mean by poverty is that, grave robbings. It is all interconnected, and exposed bones, yeah, that sounds disturbing, but they could easily be mistaken for other objects. Hence why Victor places the ring onto the branch, which turns out to be a finger. Folklore often punishes the living for their carelessness, especially near the graves. Also, psychological and social anxiety can be a key factor here, since young men were also fearful of marriage obligations, much like women, and guilt surrounding desire, death, and sexuality can also play a part. And the saddest of all, I believe, is that there was the sense that adulthood and everything that comes with it, both the good and the bad, is a contract that you cannot escape. That's more sad than disturbing, but it's reality, and reality is often sad. Yes, there are obligations you must fulfill, not that extreme, and not with exactly these kinds of consequences. It is, of course, blown out of proportion. But you understand what I mean. This is, again, an interesting subject matter when you look at it through some psychological lens, for example. And if you think about all of the anxieties that I've mentioned in this video, then you can understand how such a tale, a folk tale, could have been born. Now, why is this disturbing? Before we wrap this up, the corpse bride itself, she's not evil. She is right. She just does what is just. She abides the law. So if she comes for ya just because of your wee mistake, unintentional, albeit, doesn't matter. Alas, you will get dragged to the grave. I mean, I know I'm talking about some supernatural shit here, but sometimes it's nice to speak about some ghost stories and spooky folk tales. So the corpse bride kind of teaches us that sometimes in fairy tales there can be no villain at all. No villains, only consequences. And with that, I would like to thank you all, ladies and gentlemen, for watching. If you like unorthodox content, please consider giving this video a boost in the form of an erect thumb, and make sure to subscribe for more. Meanwhile, take good care of yourselves and your loved ones. Practice safely, whatever the heck you're practicing. Stay safe, and I shall see you all as soon as possible. Goodbye.